what happens if one person today can create everything from the bottom up? Everybody focuses on individual productivity. Nobody thinks these 5 people working together, how AI can make them better. The future of AI is to make it collaborative. So, hello everyone, and thanks David, we're here for this fantastic talk. That was really very interesting to see it from the perspective of humanist and researcher. I'm talking a little bit from I'm talking about AI and open source from the context of more of an engineer with years of experience of writing code. But not only, because I've also been, besides all the things that Gosia and Gosia told before, and by the way, thanks Mateusz and Gosia for inviting me. That was really very nice. A part of being the PMC member and committer and engineer and security committee member and Apache Software Foundation member. I also worked with for years, and some people here I met remember me from that time. So I worked in the company that created mobile apps, and we interacted a lot with designers, humans, comparing to us engineers, and that I've always enjoyed that. And for me, this is really a super interesting thing to hear how the humanists come closer to the engineers, and engineers come close to the to the humanists, because I will be talking about precisely this. And somehow I find it surprising that AI makes us kind of much closer and doing very similar things, and that's amazing. What I will talk about today is a few things. First of all, who knows what open source is? Quite a lot of people, but do you really know what open source is? So I'll try to make it a little bit closer for those who thinks that open source is just releasing software for free. Who thinks that open source is releasing software for free? Oh, not one. Okay, good. I'm surprised. Okay, but also a little bit about how I see it, and that's my personal view, how AI changes the coding landscape, and we can talk about it later because everyone has different experiences here. And then I'll try to see how this all fits together, because there are some different opinions as well. If what happens when open source meets AI, that might be either, light at the end of the tunnel, but it also might be the train coming from the tunnel. Yeah, you never know. And I'll show you a case study of a project that we've done in Apache Airflow. I'm one of the PMC members and committers of Apache Airflow, which is like one of the biggest projects in Apache Software Foundation in terms of number of contributors, especially. We have more than 3,600 contributors, and many of them are active regularly. Like last month, we had maybe like 200-300 people contributing to Apache Airflow, which is quite a good number, actually. Open source is probably about 20-something years, 20 plus actually. And very interesting things that we don't realize today, especially those people who has more hair than I have, you don't realize that there were times when open source was not a thing. There was nothing like that. Because more or less like 25-30 years ago, pretty much all the software you could get was proprietary, and you had to pay for it. And this is something that it's very strange now when you think of that, because we don't usually do that. There are some environments when you actually have to pay some licenses, pay some fees and licenses, but we just are used. And we were talking about, like, even David was saying, yeah, that there is this free LM software that you download and use. Yeah, that wasn't the case 20 plus years ago. But it changed the world of software development a lot. And the thing is, it wasn't just releasing software for free. It was more like creating trust and collaboration, building trust and collaboration in the process of creating software, that was much more important than like the free part of it is like that's how you build trust because you are transparent and you deliver and you make your software available for free. But the main point there was like people working together on doing something for public good. Some of them were paid, some of them were volunteers, and different kinds of combinations were there. But what happens now, and when you see what you see as a landscape of open source, is those kind of foundations. That's the biggest part of the open source that you see and experience today. Not only because there are lots of individual peoples, lots of smaller teams which are not forming any legal bodies, but a lot of the open source mindset, a lot of open source approach is now embodied in those foundations which are out there. I'm from the Apache Software Foundation, so I'll be talking mostly about our perspective, but there are others, Python Software Foundation, Eclipse Foundation, Linux Foundation, probably like hundreds of others. And some of those foundations are more kind of commercial nature. Some of them are more individual and merit based. Apache Software Foundation, because that I'll be talking about that, is more on the merit-based, non-commercial, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But today, comparing to like 20-something years ago, 90% of the software is open source. Nobody, like, I don't know if you realize that, but there are some studies that show that like pretty much everyone uses a very, very thin layer on top of the 90% of the open source that is there, like an iceberg, like you see the top of the iceberg, that's the software you pay for, but all the rest is open source and sometimes hidden beneath the surface, sometimes not. So that was like an outstanding success for like 20-something years, from zero to pretty much everything. It means that the model works. The question is like, or the thing is like why it works. But I wanted to say like why it's not like what doesn't make open source work. So surprisingly, it's not faster to create an open source software than proprietary one. It was not like it's way slower. When I joined the open source and started to contribute to Apache Airflow, some things that normally would take me days can take months. It's slower, deliberately. And not because like one individual takes a decision. Maybe, there are some cases like, benevolent dictators of life, BDFL, Linus, you all know Linus Torvalds. But even him, it's not like he makes all the decision. He makes the top decision, but a lot of decisions are made by a lot of individuals. And during a collaborative process, they are discussing, they are thinking, they are exchanging ideas. That's how they make decisions. So it's not because like one person makes a good decision, the software is better. And that's going to be important later in my talk. And the important thing, the goal of like open source doesn't have this goal, okay, let someone pay me for the software I've done. That's not the goal. So like the creating the code, the artifacts that is created is somewhat a byproduct, somewhat like side effect of the collaboration. And that's how we, at least in the Apache Software Foundation, we think it this way, that we don't really create code, we create communities. And I'll get to that in a moment. But how I'll get to the like a little bit more details about the Apache Software Foundation, how it works later. But we see some fundamental shifts, or not. Let's see, some shifts that we experience as open source contributors and developers and communities. We have lots and lots of synthetic content generated by AI, which looks like created by humans, but is not. We are flooded with number of requests to change something, or with security issues reported to us, for example, that is generated by AI. We had lots of talks at FOSDEM last week when we were together with Gosia and Mateusz as well, and Michał and other people were there, like 10,000 people. And that's the biggest event in open source. And lots of people were talking about that. This changes a lot, but how we can survive, like, does it change much in our case or not? This is not yet entirely clear. What I see now, at least, and that comes to a little bit my interpretation of what's going on in the AI, and that was a little bit of also mentioned before by David, is like people can do more. Yeah? Experts in their domain, people who are expert in doing something in their area, can do way more as individuals. It's a massive accelerator for productivity of individual people who can do not only coding but all the other things. This is similarly like what David said. Like there are some designers who can code, but also we have some coders who can design, and that's kind of very exchangeable. Yeah. So this is something that we see. However, we also see one other thing, which is a little bit worrying for me at least, but also I'm quite optimistic with that, is that new people have much harder time in making use of the AI. So their skills, they don't have enough skills that help them to build proper things with AI or evaluate well that what they are building makes sense. Yeah, this is a little bit of a paradox that we see right now, and this leads to, like, when you go to the open source software development, that leads to some kind of a vision that I keep on exchanging with people, and like some people are telling me that it's going to happen. It's a doomsday vision. So what happens if one person today can create everything from the bottom up, create the software, something that 20, 30 people or 50 people could create by weeks, they can create by days, apparently. Now it's possible. Will that make the whole foundations that open source built obsolete? Will we disappear? We are literally faced with that threat, or some people think that we do. But I strongly believe it's not, and I'll explain why. So right now, what we see in all the articles about how AI is great and fantastic is the solo productivity trend. So we are talking about this single person that can do way, way, way more, way, way, way faster. We see companies that expect their engineers, like fire 1/3 of the engineers and tell the other, you have to deliver 10 times more in 10 times less time, basically, or some numbers like that. This is a very, very worrying trend, because it misses a very, very critical human patch, human thing. And there are two things that are problematic there, which I see. First of all is the very, very big threat of very, very close enshittification. I don't know who knows the term enshittification. Few people knows. I'll translate it to Polish. It's gównowacenie. That's the translation by Cory Doctorow. I had the pleasure to meet Cory at the Community Over Code. The name is very important. That's the conference of Apache Software Foundation, and he gave a little bit of his perspective on the future of enshittification. And as you know, enshittification is just making deliberate changes so that whatever you got for free gets worse over time, like social media, like Gmail, or Google, or Chat GPT, maybe. Do we expect to see porn in Chat GPT soon? I think so. That's what at least Sam Altman said. Do we expect to see ads in ChatGPT? Yes, they are working on it heavily. So what we see now as a granted, the quality, the way how the LLMs are telling us, especially those done by the tech overlords of ours, this is doomed to be way worse. Like it's inevitable. This will happen. Like there is no doubt about that. We will start getting ads. We will start getting all the unwanted things. We will just get, what somebody else pay for in our ChatGPT responses. This is not a question if, it's the question of when, and probably few months. That's that close. So this is like one big threat that especially those who are using these big LLMs, big tech driven, big tech driven AI will start getting something that will be way worse than it is right now. We've seen that all with all the all the things for free that we got eventually get there. But I think, and so my talk is not really about that part. That's just a little bit of rant. My part that is missing is in the current trends of AI is like open collaboration, because this is something that is completely missing. Everybody focuses on individual productivity using AI. This person, you are more productive, you can do more, you are more productive. Nobody thinks like these 5 people working together, how AI can make them better, can make whatever they do better, make them collaborate better, make them work out something that they have never thought before. This is not even a question for any of the discussions around AI. Yeah, so that's about the Enshittification. So first of all, about the Enshittification, we know that this is going to happen. We have to be prepared for that. However, I'm not going to talk about that because I think we have a local defense. So the FOSDEM and AI Plumbers. So I was one of the organizers of AI Plumbers Dev Room at the FOSDEM at this conference. And we were talking about like how to make LLM models faster, cheaper, runnable on your machine, many of them. How to use tools like Paddler, for example, to make sure that people can very easily use those different models and run them on cheaper hardware and run them independently. This is going to happen. Like, there is no doubt. Like this, we've seen that. That's how open source was created from the beginning. That's the same story. So I'm not worried too much about that. Smart people will be using those kind of tools. Those who would not like to fall into the Enshittification, they will go and start using those, our local defense, because we already have much better models, even sometimes than the big ones. But I think what is really important is the collaboration between people. So, and coming back also, like the defense is also good for the environmental things that you've raised before. So that's also good direction. Like, we are going in this direction, hopefully, eventually. But collaboration is like any single best person that makes decision can only make the best decision of that person. And the learning from the history and from the open source community that were built in the past is that several people working together and discussing and agreeing, disagreeing, and bouncing off the ideas and building on top of the other ideas are much more productive than single person using their own decision making, because eventually when you're using LLM, you are making your decisions. Actually, currently even the LLM will actually tell you that your decisions are great, fantastic. You've done fantastic job. Yes, it's perfect. That's how it should be. So you get all and that's built in, that's part of the Enshittification already. So like all the models were built to please people. Yeah, so that's part of it's already Enshittification there, because they don't argue with you. Like, unlike regular people, people argue with you, but those LLMs, not really. They want to be very, very helpful. So what's the basic of the foundation, of the Apache Software Foundation? Very, very quickly, because we don't have a lot of time. We can talk about that later, because this is a fantastic story that I've learned when I joined the foundation 5 years ago. Of all the foundations of such a foundation and such an open source foundations of a foundation, are strong and unchanged, because the whole idea is like, we built a great community, and then software will be produced as an after effect or as a side effect. So the motto of the ASF from the very beginning was community over code. So it doesn't matter if you use AI or not to create the code, because we don't produce code. Actually, a funny thing, Apache Software Foundation does not create a code. Like, not many people know about that, but Apache Software Foundation is a non-profit charity organization in US, and it cannot produce code, cannot create code. It's against the bylaws of the Apache Software Foundation. Apache Software Foundation releases the code that somebody contributed to it as a donation. Whether it's an AI generated or human generated doesn't really matter. What matters is the people who are working on the projects and decide what they accept as a contribution and what they don't accept as a contribution. This is how it works. And that was completely surprising for me when I joined Apache Software Foundation that it works this way. So software is really a byproduct, something that comes out of it. So on the surface, what you get from the open source is the software and the binaries that you install. But deep inside, those are the people and the learnings and people who can answer why they are building what they are building, what they are accepting, what they are not accepting, bounce the ideas, discuss, make decisions. And for me, it's like I do most of the commits in Apache Airflow. I'm the #1 committer for long years because I have ADHD, so that helps. Yeah, like, and I do very many small commits. That also helps. That was a bit cheating. But I also spend most of my time absolutely discussing, agreeing, not agreeing, arguing, heavily arguing. Sometimes not shouting, maybe not, but kind of discussing and bouncing ideas. And the case study that I wanted to show how it works, because it's always work to show how things work on examples. So for 10 years, we had big problem because Airflow is a massive code base. It has a nice UI, always English, and always people asked us to translate it in multiple languages. We had more than 600 phrases that we had to translate. And we needed to do it, and we never wanted to do it before because it was we are engineers. We don't like to do translations. We don't have anyone commitment who can do translations all the time. Why would we spend our time on it? It's boring and stuff. Okay. So what we've done, we just talk, okay, we have AI. AI can do translations pretty well, but putting AI on our project and say translate it to as many languages you can, it's probably not a very good idea. Without any verification, any human checking anything. So we've developed the whole process where we invited people who wanted to contribute language translation for their languages. And we was like, okay, this language, those people, this language, those people. And we built the whole structure, kind of very small, very simple. The structure is really few people are responsible for a language. Then we developed, and actually, I vibe coded the script. Don't tell anyone. I vibe coded the script. That was a tool that helped to do this translation automatically, and most importantly, incrementally make updates, because we didn't only want to translate it once, but also we wanted to add translations as they are added, because we are continuously adding new features. So we have to have some ways of keeping the things updated. So very simple tool, very nice. But the important part, those people who took ownership of those translations, and that was the most important part of it, they took ownership and they got peer review all those translations, agree that they are good, discuss if they are not good, discuss if things might be better, and be responsible for the final PR that is merging those translations. So it's not an AI that is doing that. AI is starting the translation, but then humans take over, and with the collaborative spirit, they work on that and make it really good for the UI. So vibe coding the tooling. So that was really cool, because that was the first time I seriously started to use AI some time ago. It's I said, okay, do this, do that. Okay, fine, it works, cool. That was very interesting. So at the end, what we have, this is in 8 weeks we had 8 languages, and now we have 19 languages, starting from Arabic, Catalan. Yeah, we have Catalan language, of course, Polish, French, Spain. Chinese, Taiwanese Chinese. And you see, this is a just random summary of my nice vibe coded tool that shows how much translation you've done. For, I don't know, 8 months now, we're keeping it up to date to 99 something% of translations. And that's continuously being updated. So this tooling is kind of nice. It aids with translation, shows what you do. But the important part, we also figured out how to do the UX. I don't know if it's very visible, but this is a Polish translation which I've done yesterday actually on the remaining. That was 99.2. Now it's 100 as of yesterday because I've done that. So you see, this is like an AI copilot in IntelliJ, and what the tooling what does, it takes the original translation, adds a to do translate original version, and then I ask the AI overlord or AI tool that I'm using, please translate or the remaining to do translate into the language, and it nicely does. And it also like shows it in the nice way, like so that you can compare that and see does it make sense or it doesn't. You can very nicely see the UX, accept individual changes or modify them while you're doing it. So UX does matter, and we build it in the way that we didn't even tell people how to do it. We just told them like to do translate and use whatever AI tooling you want to do this translation. It was like it's simple. There's nothing complex. It's just very simple thing. But the fact that we gave the tooling, we told them how to do this. We told them everyone how to even wrote down kind of rules, the kind of agents rules should be concise and you know like all the things that the UA translation should do. It'll make them super. It's like it takes no time whatsoever to generate those translations. It takes seconds, literally. Then you see like what was translated. It actually uses the translations already done automatically from the same files because it's an AI. It actually reads the things that you tell it to read, and it allows very easily to do the translations. And it wouldn't be possible at all for us to do it before because this part would be completely not compatible with how engineers work. They are not as human as other people. Like translation is not something that they would like to do, you know. But if they got the translation and they have to just look at it and see, okay, that looks good, that is completely different story. And we have maybe 60 people now in the group doing the translations, something like that. We have a common Slack channel where we discuss the translation. We have a channel where we discuss like there are like different plurals, the way how they are translated. I've learned that Polish has 5 plurals, and like I knew that before, but I found out that Arabic has 6, like different plurals. Yeah. So all the ending of the words depending on the numbers, and we've learned how to do it together, and we learned from each other basically. And result, we have this nice kind of UI of Airflow, which is nicely translated with all the things that looks good and looks nice and are understandable by those who are using Airflow. One thing, like we do have a Easter egg in there. So I mean, anyone here uses Airflow? I mean, maybe no. I didn't expect that. But if you use, I always have a challenge. Find the Easter egg, and it's very Polish and very nice. It's down there, but also there is one question. So we had something in English called triggerer, and we discussed a lot as a part of like how to translate triggerer. Any ideas how to translate something that is triggering something? Very like that was the first idea, yes, what we had, but we didn't like it. It's just not a very nice word. So eventually we came up with "cyngel," which is like very nice Polish word, and it's actually very kind of a little bit off the board, but not too much. So the true power of AI in open source is like it actually improved our collaboration because we were able to work together using the AI tools we got. We build relationship between the people who are working together, and we empower those people by giving them the right tooling and guidelines on how to use the AI to make them work. And actually, the thing is, it actually made it possible to do it because, like, you also said something like we can do now something that we wouldn't be able to do, and it's exactly the same, but from the other direction. Yeah, we know how to code, but translation now we can do it without, but still not without other people. We still have other people in there, and the collaboration is there, and that's the important part of what we've done. And also one last thing, we have lots of new people in this group, kind of new learners, people who have never contributed before. That was their first contribution. Now some of them are contributing more, contributing code, learning from us and collaborate. So if you ask why I'm not worried about those new people who are not getting experience. I'm not worried because I think open source is the place where they will, because we are completely open to that. We don't want to get all the money or as fast as possible deliver features that business wants from us. No, we like there is this saying in open source: we deliver when ready. Yeah, that's the question. Like when the new version will be released, when ready. That's the answer, basically, because we want to make sure that what we release is good, and we want to collaborate with people. Community is much more important for us to build than the code that we create, and that's something that not everyone is aware who didn't really ever contribute to open source. It's like you just use it, but you don't know how it's created. It's like with making sausages, you never want how it's made, but like how they are made. But like in this case, like knowing how it's made is actually fantastic. So I think what happens with in the future in open source, it's not going to disappear. We will change the ways how we are working. That's for sure, because we will have less time to code because we will have to mentor people. But also in this less time to code, we will create more code because AI will allow us to create this more code, even if we have less time for it, which is actually quite cool because I love to interact with people, and this is something that is very common with the open source people who are contributing. They are not usually. This is something that I've learned first time when I came to the no, that was a community, Apache Con it was named before, but we renamed it to Community Over Code. So that was the European conference of community of Apache Software Foundation. And after the conference, I went to the bar and I sat with the founders of the foundation. I didn't know they were there, but it turned out that they were like those people who created it 20 years ago. They are like just normal people who drank beer and we could talk to them, like, what? I mean, those are not the kind of nerdy, geeky guys who are like, only staring at their code. No, not really, not really. They are humans, and that was a discovery I made that this is a fantastic place to be. So I think the future is collaborative. The open source is part of the, strengthening the in software especially. I think we have this very strong foundation, and we've always been working on collaboration, on working together, on making people and making community more important than the code we create. And for us, it's like, okay, so now we can create more code with AI. Cool. I mean, but that's still a byproduct. The community is still the main thing. Yeah. So I think future of AI is to make it collaborative, and I hope it's going to happen, and we will be one of the strongest part of it. Thank you.
Do we have questions? Yes.
Thank you for the talk. I'm curious, what do you think makes the open source community good and what makes it bad?
Of course, as with every community, there are good and bad things. You're right. And the funny thing is, like, I sang in a choir for 30 years. I'm a choirist. You can hear it from my voice as well, bass. But we had a very similar kind of setting in the choir as we have now in open source, which like, board, elections, president, treasurer, all the stuff. 20 something people. Now we have 1,000 members in ASF. Surprisingly, all the dramas are the same. Like, nothing changed. Nothing changed. So there are dramas. So in the open source, there are dramas because there are people who have much more vested interest in personal interest. It's like not that they get money in Apache Software Foundation. That's also surprising for many people. In Apache Software Foundation, nobody who makes decisions earns money. Those are all volunteers. Board, president, VPs, PMC members, committers, every one of those persons cannot be paid by the foundation because foundation doesn't do that. It's a charity organization. It cannot pay for that, which is an interesting one. There are a few people who are paid like to keep the infrastructure running, for example. But that also means that people who are there, they have other sources of money, of course, but they put their soul into the open source. because they want to do it, not because they have to do it, because otherwise they will not get money. They just want to do it, no matter if somebody pays them for not. It's like you don't have to. Yeah, it's not your kind of day job usually. Like, except me, I'm actually paid for being open source contributor, which is fantastic. Uh, and But most of the people just put their soul in there, like me too. Yeah? I put 180% of my time, and I'm paid only for 100. So this makes all the dramas more dramatic, because people believe it impacts their life. So you have to be very, very careful there, and take part in all the discussions and arguments, making sure that you understand that there are humans on the other side, and that people have different opinion. And this is like the bad thing in terms of, like, it's very difficult thing to deal with if you are not prepared for that. So that's the bad thing, that there are things happening. There was even a meeting at FOSDEM about, like, showing the crises in open source foundation. Like, every foundation and every big organization of open source had some kind of crisis connected to, like, people dramas, or people's fighting, or things like that. So that's something that you have. But the good thing, those things get resolved, and people are lovely, and in general. So those are like just cases, individual cases. The best part of open source is the fantastic people that I get to interact every day. I was at the FOSDEM. That was my fourth one, I think. And I met maybe 30, 40 of my friends, which I meet there regularly every year. And that was like the best days for me to interact with them, to meet them. So the people are the best. So both people are the best and the worst part of the foundation, I would say. But it depends how you look at that.
Thank you.
So you mentioned you were the organizer of AI Plumbers at FOSDEM.
Yep.
That was one of the populous dev room this year. I think Rust probably, or RISC-V was more popular than AI Plumbers. And one of the things AI Plumbers, I think, is that you make AI to be truly open source. Do you believe in that concept, conceptually, that AI could be truly open source by the end of the day?
Yes.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. Yes. It's there is nothing inherently missing there. Things get faster. Things get better. Hardware gets better. People learn how to do it. Improve the algorithms, and etc. Like, 25 years ago, all software was proprietary. Who could imagine that 20 years later, we have 90% of the software which is open source? So there will be some proprietary LLMs as well, of course, Enshittified and so on. But there will be open source alternatives for anyone who wants to look for them. Maybe not everyone will want to look for them. That's another story. But it's gonna be there. Yes.
Thank you. More questions?
So maybe quick question, very simple question. I'm a layperson, like I have no background in AI, and I'm not a developer, so it's a completely new thing for me. I'm just learning, and it was very interesting to hear what you were saying. I look at open source from a completely different perspective. For me, so far, open source was just a code, a recipe that was given, and here I understand in AI you have like kind of few layers. You have code, you have training data, and you have weights. I think that's three
Yep.
combinations. And you mentioned that you believe AI to be completely open sourced.
Yes.
What does it mean? Does it mean that we're getting also the training data available? And because it's a completely different understanding of the open source, at least based on your presentation for me right now. And again, sorry if this is obvious.
No, not at all. Not at all.
I would like to better understand this.
It's a very, very good question, because
Okay, great.
because the industry doesn't agree on that yet at all. Like, there is the OCI, which is the institution that does standardization of licenses, and they also kind of standardize the open models, open AI models, and it was mostly about the weights and software and data. No, for various reasons, and. And we don't know yet. We don't know yet what it really means to be open, because we haven't haven't gone that far. But I personally think that, and that might be a controversial thing, but I think eventually with the AI world, the authors' rights will cease to exist generally, in terms of we'll have to replace it with something else. We don't know yet what it will be, because authors' rights or copyrights, basically copyrights, not authors. Authors' rights will continue to exist. Copyrights will cease to exist, because copyrights were introduced. Is quite a new concept. It is 1700, like sometime when the Gutenberg print was developed, the first copyright rules appeared. Before that, everyone could copy what they wanted, and there was no law for that. So it's like a few hundred years, and now we are in completely different situation, that we are not copying, we are generating from the sources, which sometimes looks like copying, but it's not exactly this. And I think we'll have to figure out something else. And once this happens, then most of the value will be in creativity of people using those AIs, not really like, or not creativity of those people using, like, on creativity that you build on top. So there were some examples from your talk that people are using AI for, like, recording your voice and releasing that for free. That will be probably a default thing, and then the data will be open by default, most likely. That's my thinking, but that's just guessing. I don't know.
Thank you. And one more question.
I have a question about your thoughts on crafted quality, and how do you manage that in the open source world? It's almost like you're like a bunch of builders and architects in the
Yes.
same person. And
Yes.
great software is usually opinionated software. Maybe it's controversial statement, but I wonder how you manage that in open source. Can open source be have, like, can you build products which are of high quality and craft?
Well, 90% of the software is right now is built this way. So yes, absolutely, the quality is there, because we care about the quality. And also with AI, this is very interesting angle. What I'm thinking now, we will have a little bit more difficult. It will be a little more difficult to create new software, or it will not, or such a software will not be as popular, because it's not discoverable by AI now. Right now, AI uses a lot of the software that's being developed for the last 20, 30 years, and it builds new software based on that mostly, because that's how AI works. So we will see, I guess, and that's again a guess, we'll see that those who already have established communities, projects, ideas will be thriving, because their software will be used, and it will be used only because it will provide great quality, because AI will make mistakes, and the quality of the software, for example, is like to make sure that whoever uses your software will not make mistakes. Because like in our case, in Apache Software Foundation, we are not producing end user products. We are producing the building blocks that right now AI uses. So whatever we produce have to be of a good quality. Otherwise, we will fall out, because nobody, like, AI will be using that, but it will be failing, and like, so we'll have to do good quality, and we do, and we, let's say, the opinionated part. The important part is that with whatever we do, we try to get to the consensus and agreement on what we develop. And even if we don't get to consensus, we do finally vote on it. And that's a very, very formal procedure in our case. And in this case, it is somewhat opinionated, in the sense that somebody, like group of people, makes an opinion, not a single person. And we will continue doing that. And that works very well in our case, especially if you apply this great community where people, so we have this fantastic thing like disagree but engage. I've lost a number of votes in decision making in our project, yet I followed all the decisions that were made, no matter if I agreed with them or not. So this is how the way how we keep the decision making process with the people involved, and that leads to the quality eventually, because we have a lot of people looking at things, a lot of people discussing different idea, trying to get to consensus, which happens maybe 90% of time, and there 10% is like, just okay, we have different opinions and we vote. And that in my opinion leads to quality, because we and also because we care. And that's also a super important thing, and something that relates also to the issue, the bad and good things, is like in open source, most people, at least in Apache Software Foundation, where I work and where I spend a lot of my time, most people care. And if they care, they will not release software which is not of a good quality. Even funny thing, when we release software, we actually have to vote on it, and we have to have 3+1s from PMC members of Apache Software Foundation in order to release software. So if we find any errors, we just vote no, -1. I will not agree to release something like that, because there is this embarrassing problem there. So yeah, we care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This was very interesting. And I have a question about what do you think is the condition of sharing economy in general at present? Because and how can we actually boost this vibe of contributing to something? Because yeah, we've seen a lot of hype around user-generated content quite some time ago, and then everything got enshittified on our content. So I don't mean that the foundations obviously are doing the same, but I can feel and read about this general notion that people are experiencing this kind of AI fatigue, and also lack of agency in general, even like correlating, of course, to some psychological crises. So yeah, a general question is what practical things can we do to encourage more engagement of people who are not specialists, not activated maybe, so not caring yet?
Mm-hmm. So I don't. So I don't think that changes much. Like we had generally very little percent of our users contribute back in general. That hasn't changed much, and I see a lot of people who are willing to learn right now, trying to contribute, because they learn by contributing. And actually for me, like I don't really have to encourage people to contribute right now, because we have like an influx of people who want to learn from those more experienced, and we just have too many of them, even. Like, so we are actually fatigued by the AI slop generated, because they often use AI and they don't know what they are doing, and we have to explain them, etc., etc. I personally closed 38 tickets last week of one person who didn't listen, and 38 PRs were closed with explanation why, and go read our guidelines how you should contribute. So this happens. This is a real thing. But I personally think, yes, so there is this fear that AI agents will not contribute back like humans using the software, but we didn't have many of those, to be honest, only those who cared. And I strongly believe those who care will continue contributing. And I actually want those. I don't want anyone else. I don't want people who don't care. So if you use the software and don't care, fine, okay, that's how the license works. You can use it, no problem. But there is a small number of people who actually care. So the thing is, for us, what we make it super easy to contribute. We have some guidelines, we help them. We are very encouraging people who try to contribute, and discouraging to people who are trying to contribute something that makes no sense. So it's a bit like you have to be a little bit two-faced. I sometimes, I keep on joking that I'm a bear, but somewhere I'm a teddy bear, and sometimes I'm a grizzly bear. Depends who I'm talking to. Yeah. And that's how we work, and that's how it works for us. So I think it's just speaking about what we are doing, telling people that they can contribute, making them aware of that, engaging them and pulling them in when you see that there is someone cool. So we do it all the time. It's not something that we didn't do before. That doesn't change much. It's just we have to learn how to filter out the kind of a lot of noise that we are going to have, and we are having now. But also, the funny thing is, probably at some point of time, so there was a closing talk at the FOSDEM from Daniel Standberg from Curl, who got like 5% of good quality issue like security issue reports recently for like last few months. Before he used to get 15% or 20. Now with AI, he get very little. So he closed the bounty. So he stopped rewarding people. And he said something that stuck with me very well. This is only happening because it's free now, essentially. But when those overlords would start charging for that, this will stop because it will be more expensive for the people to generate those slop than what we have now. So it's probably right now we are really in a bit of a flux and something that we have to deal with the noise, but we'll survive. I mean, we have some ways and ideas, and there are some interesting ideas floating around. I actually had a talk about that in at FOSDEM as well, and we think about European vulnerability platform, for example, for security, and we will be sharing some information about who is a good reporter, who is bad reporter, and maybe detecting bad reports from or filtering bad reports from good reports. So we have some ideas there, and we'll figure it out, I'm sure.